here if you're Philly.
It's off to Leonard, defended by Simmons. Is this the dagger? 15 fourth quarter points by Kawhi Leonard. And the game winner, 41 points.
Yeah, that was the dagger, all right. That's what I'm talking about. What a critical moment. Now, that wasn't... Now, imagine if that shot was like Game 7 of the NBA Final, right? It wasn't that, but what a critical moment to be in, because at that second, if Kawhi had missed that shot, they were going to go into overtime, which means both teams reset, and who knows what would have happened as they played another 5 minutes or overtime. Now, lots of critical moments, but of course, that's just such an epic shot. Thought, well, we got to show that, and of course, I got to come and wear a jersey this morning, right? Great to see you here this morning. My name is Tim Hyjek, and for those of you who don't know me, that makes sense because I'm usually not here. I'm on the Creekside staff team, but I'm the Kitchener campus pastor, so I'm up here hanging with you today. It's great to have you here. It's great to be here. And you right now who are in Kitchener, great to have you hanging out in Kitchener with Chris this morning. And if you're online from wherever you are, we're just glad that you're able to tune in, because this morning what we're going to be talking about critical moments. And this morning I'm going to start by asking you a question which really isn't much of a question because it's such an easy answer. It's an obvious one, but I'm just going to ask anyways. The question is this: Have you ever experienced a critical moment in your life? Well, the answer is yes, of course you have. All of us have experienced critical moments in our lives. In fact, for some of us, critical moments begin the moment the alarm clock goes off in the morning, right? I mean, it depends on what the critical moment is. All of us experience lesser kind of critical moments, and then more really intense critical moments. And of course, through the different ages and stages of life, we experience critical moments, the most intense to sort of minor moments, but we experience them. It's something that we all have in common. I want to start this morning by sharing with you an experience that I had about 16 years ago, just before my daughter Julia was born, and I would consider this a critical moment. It was on a Saturday in Cambridge, in Hespeler, where I live. I still live there, but where I lived at the time. And it was a fall afternoon, a nice fall afternoon. It was sunny. It wasn't like I was going to go out there and hang out. It was kind of cool, but it wasn't enough to snow. It was just one of those nice afternoons. It's a Saturday. Amanda and I are together, and we're hanging out. She has some stuff to do because she has to get prepared to go to, I think it was like a bridal shower or a baby shower. Whatever the case, she had some stuff to prepare. I was watching college football because it's the fall season, and Saturday's college football, Sunday's NFL football. So I'm just kind of following suit that way, right? And I'm watching football, and Amanda is making what I noticed to be a chocolate score trifle. Now, I just heard in the crowd, right? You need to understand that's art, that's music to my ears, that's special, okay? And she makes it in a big glass bowl, and then of course covers it up with saran wrap, and then puts it in the fridge to keep it cool until she's going. She has to go and run some errands before eventually coming back, getting changed, and heading out to wherever she was heading in to take the dessert. So I said, that's cool, fine, whatever. And I go downstairs into the basement, and I continue to watch TV. And as any good person who's sitting watching sports does, they eventually go get some food because you just find you're getting hungry, okay? So I go upstairs, I go into the fridge, not thinking much about anything except, hey, what can I find to eat? And there, let me rephrase. There before my eyes was what I consider black gold, okay? I'm not talking oil. I'm talking black gold. I'm talking, there's like Oh, I'm just picturing it, right? I'm losing myself here. Okay, so it's like score bits. It's like there's pudding in there. There's like this moist, cakey stuff. I think there's Cool Whip and this and that, and it's right there. And it's like I'm mesmerized. It's like looking at like a Monet or a Picasso or a Garfunkel or an Armoire, right? Or whatever, right? Okay, it's like that, right? I'm losing myself in the moment, and I'm thinking like, if this is good enough to look at, I need to take it out and not waste energy from the fridge. I need to close the fridge. Take it out, put it on the counter, and I'm staring at this thing, and I see a note on top of it, and the note says this, and I quote, "To whom it may concern, before your eyes is a chocolate score trifle. And in this moment, if one as much as eats a piece of this trifle, you will surely die." And I emphasize the word die because it was in caps, okay? This is a critical moment. Here's the truth. I know it's going to a wedding shower or whatever. I know that my wife made this. And the truth is, I'm reading this, and I know when I interpret it, it means please don't touch. But I got to do the right thing eventually, right? So, of course, what every good, humble, God-fearing husband does, I proceed to take off the saran wrap and eat it. Okay? I didn't eat all of it. I didn't eat all of it. I ate a little bit, well, maybe more than a little bit. But I put it back, put the saran wrap on, put that note on. I mean, I acknowledged the note. I put it back in the fridge. No one would be the wiser, okay? It's all good. I'm full. I go downstairs. I'm not touching it anymore. It's gone. Amanda gets home a little bit later. I hear the front door from upstairs. And she comes in, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, Amanda's home. She's probably going to get ready, and that's probably what she proceeded to do. Now, where I'm sitting in the basement, right above me is the kitchen, right? The kitchen floor. So you can kind of hear the steps and stuff from the kitchen floor. And all of a sudden, I hear what is like a thundering crash. And I'm thinking, what's going on? I know it's daylight. I know it's sunshine. I know there's no thunderstorm at this time of year, but it's like a crash. And all of a sudden, it just kind of occurs to me. You know what she did? She slammed the door in the fridge. What is she thinking? I mean, we can't afford to get another fridge. Why would she do that? Why can't she just close the door like a normal person, right? I got a little irritated. Well, then I hear something that, truthfully, still to this day, brings chills down my spine, makes the hair on my arm stand. It's one word. See, it's one word, and when this word was said, let's just say whenever I hear this word, I think of, being in the dentist's office. Or I think of the principal calling me to his office, right? Or I think of being spanked as a kid or whatever, right? This one word, and it sounded just like this, okay? Timothy. Listen, people don't call me Timothy, but my wife will call me Timothy. And when my wife calls me Timothy, that's when the hairs go up on the arms. And then I hear this. You know what that was? That was the sound of footsteps going from the main floor down the stairs into the basement area. So, of course, I'm busted. What's every good, God-fearing husband who's humble, who knows he's guilty, going to do at that point? If the stairs are over there, you know what I did? I ran to the corner over there and I hid in the fetal position, okay? I find myself in another critical moment, and here's the reality. I'm not going to tell you the rest of the story because it's none of your business. But I can just say that today I lived to tell the story, okay? You kind of get the idea. That was a critical moment. Now, I've just said to you, some are intense, some are in the big picture, whatever, and that was kind of whatever, one of those moments. Here's the deal with a critical moment, and the deal is this. It's kind of like a moment where it's either self-induced or not. In my case, it was self-induced. It requires you to respond in some way which will ultimately impact you, and most often those around you, positively or negatively. So I talked about my moment, but then, of course, there's other moments. What about a critical moment? I know a critical moment was when I proposed to Amanda. Guys, you know it can go one of a few ways, right? That can be potentially a critical moment. If you've ever raised kids, or you're raising kids, or you're going to raise kids, there's a lot of critical moments that are along the way. Maybe it's in your career. Maybe you've had critical moments in your career or in your job, whatever those situations have been. Maybe it's even financially. Maybe it's relationally. Maybe it's things on a daily basis, like you commute to Toronto and that person just absolutely cut you off. That can become a critical moment based on your response, right? There's all kinds of those different moments that we find in our everyday lives. Critical moments are important moments. Why are they important? Because ultimately, critical moments have the potential to be game-changing moments in our lives. They have the potential to kind of switch things around, to kind of take us in a different direction. They're important moments in our lives. Remember, some are less, some are not as big of a deal, but then some are pretty intense. It just depends on what we're going through. Now, what's the goal of a critical moment? Well, I think the goal is pretty simple, among other things. I think it's this. We want to make sure that we make the right decisions to experience the right outcome. That next step is such an important thing. Those next steps are very important because ultimately, wherever we find ourselves in that kind of a moment, we want to make the right decisions because we want to ultimately experience the right outcome. When you're in those moments, what is the process that you begin to work through to help you determine what that next right step is and what those next right steps are? That's what we want to take a look at this morning. Many of you here, or most of you, if not all of you, I don't know, you may have heard about, let alone read about, the account of Jesus turning water into wine. It's one of the more popular stories. John wrote it in his account in John chapter 2, 1-10. And if you have a Bible in whatever format, you can follow along with me this morning. We're going to talk about that this morning. And first, what we're going to do two things. First of all, we're going to take a look at some overarching bigger truths of Jesus and who he is and what he's done for us. These are rich truths, kind of overarching big picture truths about God that we find through this story. I'm going to give you 3 examples of those, but we're not going to stay there. We're going to move along and we're going to kind of dive into pulling out a few other truths from some other characters that Jesus interacts with through the account. Now, what do I mean by these kind of bigger overarching truths? What's really cool about John's writings is he has a lot of symbolism in his writings. And this story, or this account, is no exception. And we see a couple symbolic truths here. And let me just give you a few examples of it, okay? Jesus turning water into wine. First of all, it revealed a glimpse of God's glory, okay? It revealed a glimpse of God's glory. Now, God's glory was not fully revealed until his resurrection, but it revealed a glimpse of his glory. We need to remember that this was the beginning of Jesus' ministry. It was sort of like the first kind of act, so to speak, and he had performed signs and wonders, okay, miracles, and this was kind of Jesus' first miracle. And this miracle revealed a glimpse of God's glory. And not only that, but it inspired faith among the newly formed group of disciples. Jesus had just put these disciples together, and at this time, they estimate that there were probably 5 disciples with him there. When you see this and you witness something like this, it sort of rubs off on your faith. It kind of inspired the faith of this newly formed group of disciples. Secondly, Jesus turning water into wine, it symbolized the turning from an old order, okay? Jewish laws and custom. What was the old order? Well, think about at that time, the ability for them to connect with God was a lot different, okay? The old order was going to be changed to a new order ushered in by Jesus. And that order was this, is that from an old order to a new order, that they would experience direct connection with God through Christ, okay? The forgiveness of sin. Jesus was ushering in this brand new age, this fulfillment, and the water into wine was like, okay, turn water into wine. It's something old to something new. And that was a really big overarching truth that we see through that. And then R. Kent Hughes said this, and I like the way he put this. He said, by performing his miracle in those stone urns, our Savior was testifying that the old religious rituals were dead, okay, the way that they would connect to God before, and that he was filling the urns with new wine. There was a new wine coming. There was a different way that we were going to be able to connect with God. And then finally, the amount of water turned to wine symbolized the incredible provision. And I say incredible provision, I like the word abundance of this new order. Okay, there was an abundant amount, an overabundant amount of grace and forgiveness. And these are some overarching rich truths that we learn about Jesus through this story. Now, this is really cool how he did this, but understand, Jesus did not do this because his motive was, well, I need to come onto the scene now and start my ministry. So I'm gonna make a big splash. I'm gonna really do it up, and I'm gonna turn all this water into wine. That wasn't Jesus' motive at all. In fact, Jesus' motive really, this was the first tangible expression of Jesus showing humanity what he's going to be able to do for us. It's a really powerful, powerful picture. And what I want to do is I want to take a look and remind us of that, those big picture truths, but also now take a look at a few other truths that we pull out of and really tie them into, okay, well, how is this relevant with facing life's critical moments? Okay, so we're going to kind of put this together. So as we do that, let's just go right through the story. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana. Now, Cana, let's say 12 kilometers from Nazareth, where Jesus was coming from, okay? Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. Why is it important to know this? Again, context is so crucial. We need to know that a wedding, really important thing. And you're like, well, obvious, yeah, it's an important thing. Well, understand culturally at that time, that Jewish wedding that they're going to, that is an important thing. That is an ordeal. That's how they did weddings then. In fact, the whole town was invited to the wedding. It would be an insult if you did not get invited to the wedding. It would be an insult to the bride and groom if you didn't attend for at least a little bit. And you're like, well, what do you mean a little bit of it? Like an hour here, whatever. Here's the deal with these weddings. They would go on for a whole week. We're just in day 3 right now. This was an important thing. And it was the responsibility mainly of the groom to make sure that the food was always provided and there was enough, and that the wine was present and that there was enough wine as well. Really important to note. Now, we get to the third day, and it jumps right into it. It says, when the wine was gone, for some reason, there's no more wine. This is not a good thing. Jesus' mother says to him, she says, they have no more wine. She's kind of excited. She's kind of concerned about it. Now, here's what we got to understand with this. Well, what's the big deal? I mean, can't you just, go down over to Zares and pick up some more bottles of wine? I mean, we know it didn't work that way necessarily, but wine was more than just a drink. It actually symbolized this idea of joy, of celebration. That's what it symbolized. It was like she was saying, they have no more wine, but she's also saying, they have no more joy. They have no more celebration. This was a real concern, and this was a real concern for the bride and groom who didn't know what was going on. In fact, culturally speaking, hospitality was a very intense thing, very important issue. In fact, this would be a major social faux pas for the bride and the groom. In fact, they would actually have the potential of being shamed in their own town for their married life if this kind of thing happened. It was an intense thing. It was a crucial thing. And this wedding celebration is beginning to look like it's going to become a nightmare. Here's Mary. She recognizes it, and very few other people, I think, would have recognized it. She recognizes it, and she finds herself in the middle of a critical moment, and what's she do? She tells Jesus. What do you do? What do you do when that critical moment arrives in your life? What do you do? How do you respond? Life's good. We got it all put together. We're working on it. We're a work in progress. I mean, we're even getting to the point where if we anticipate things that might kind of throw us off, we make sure that we nip it in the bud so that we make sure we stay in our sweet spot. Life's good. Only to find out that out of nowhere at times, the not self-induced critical moments happen. We find out that, yeah, there's no more wine. Those are tough moments. Those are intense moments. Those are important moments. You see, in those moments, the pressure's on, isn't it? You're feeling the pressure of the moment. In fact, you're feeling the pressure of the moment, and there's emotion that's driving that moment because you understand that in that certain moment, the stakes are high. In fact, they're high because it will not only impact you, but it can potentially impact those around you. Well, what do we typically do? Well, when we get into that moment, we want to fix it, right? We figured out we're fixer-upper kind of people. We want to fix it and get it right and get out of that moment so we can get comfortable again. That's not a bad thing at all. That's just kind of human nature. That's how we roll, right? We look to other things, right? We look to good counsel and we do those things, and those aren't necessarily bad things. Maybe at times we find that the moment is drawing longer than it should. I'm not here to tell you when a critical moment turns into a critical season, what that time frame is, but we're starting to get frustrated because this just seems to be going on longer, or we think that we have the answer and we jump right into it only to find out that when we jumped into it, it ended up being the wrong thing, and here we are worse off than when we started. What if before anything else, I mean, some of the things that we do as a response are good things, but what if before anything else, what if we didn't just respond in the moment, but we learned to acknowledge Jesus in the moment? What if we actually were able to have just the wherewithal, and we learned to be able to actually take a pause, or maybe even take a step back in the moment, and to actually acknowledge Jesus? Well, why would you do that? What does that mean? What if it meant that you included Jesus in the game plan? That you were intentional. Maybe Jesus is the center of the game plan. Maybe he writes up the game plan and he ends up being the coach in your corner, right? See, when I say this idea of acknowledging Jesus in the moment, it's like we declare God in the situation. It's like it redirects our focus from the problem to him first and foremost. It's kind of like it doesn't take the problem away, it just kind of puts the priorities in perspective. I think sometimes when we're able to acknowledge Jesus in the moment, it actually saves us from reaction. If I have a dartboard here and I'm ready to throw a dart, I have kind of a process that I'm going to go through, okay? I'm going to get ready. I'm going to kind of plant myself, and I'm going to, kind of look at it, and then I'm going to look at the bullseye because I want to aim for the bullseye. So I'm going to kind of ready, I'm going to aim, and then I'm going to fire, okay? It's typically what we do. I think that when we react to things, I like to compare it to throwing a dart at the dartboard. Instead of ready, aim, fire, you know what we can tend to do because of our reactions? Our reactions cause us to do this: ready, fire, aim, right? And next thing you know, we're not even hitting the dartboard. We hit the wall beside it because we reacted. Here's a great thing to remember. When we acknowledge Jesus in the moment, it helps us to be actors and not reactors in the moment. It's so critical because we know that acting on something is different than reacting to something. We acknowledge Jesus. Now, we don't always get an instant answer, but we're able to kind of find a pause, and we're able to sort of just kind of sort it out and figure it out and kind of work through, okay, how am I going to begin to take the next right step because I've got my priorities in line right now. We acknowledge Jesus in the moment. Now, Mary calls on Jesus. And here's kind of Jesus' response. It's a little weird. We'll kind of work through this though. He says, "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My hour has not yet come. Now, when you see the word woman, it kind of sounds rude. It almost sounds derogatory. It's like, what's he doing? Is he being rude to mom here? Like, how does that work out? Understand, again, culturally, this was a very normal way of addressing. It would almost be like saying, instead of putting woman there, I would type in ma'am. Okay? Even when Jesus was hanging on the cross and Mary was interacting with him at that most kind of intimate moment, their last moments together, he still called her woman. That was the expression, okay? So there's nothing bad to be read into that. He says, why do you involve me? My hour has not come yet. He says, wait. I'm not sure if this is our business, and I want you to understand that my hour has not come yet, okay? Ultimately, he's talking about his impending death, but he's saying, I beat to my Father's drum. In other words, what he's saying is that my mission is not whatever your mission is. My mission here is coming from God the Father. I beat to the Father's drum, right? I always acknowledge the Father first. I don't just react to a situation or react to you and just kind of go with what you're going with, right? He's kind of what he's kind of doing is kind of setting up, okay, here's the reason, here's his presence, and here's kind of the why with his motive and his agenda. Now, Mary, maybe that wasn't the response that she wanted to hear, and we don't know if she said something that John didn't record. All we know is that she said this. Mary, his mother, saw the servants after Jesus had responded, and she kind of looks at him and says, well, listen, do whatever he tells you then. Do whatever he tells you. Well, how many of you know that doing whatever Jesus tells you is sometimes easier said than done, right? It can be a process. It takes courage. It can be confusing at times. And of course, that's what she tells the servants. Now, here's where it kind of gets fun. See, nearby stood 6 stone water jars, and the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial hand washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. So picture these 6 massive stone urns, and they could hold up to 180 gallons of water. So we're not talking a bucket, right? Now, they had a specific purpose, and they had a specific purpose at this wedding. It was Jewish ceremonial law, and it said this. It said that they believed that through the course of the day, they became symbolically unclean by the things that they were around and the things they touched, okay? Everyday objects. So if you were coming in and this was your deal and you were going to come in and participate in the reception and you were going to eat, you see, before you eat, you would take some water out of these jugs and you would pour it on your hands, and that would declare you clean from your uncleanliness from that day. And that's what they believed. So this was a very strict thing. This was a very serious thing. You didn't mess around with it, okay? You didn't borrow some water and make Kool-Aid or juice from it, okay? This was ceremonial stuff. This was Jewish law. Jesus says to the servants, he says, okay, guys, go fill the jars with water. So what do? They actually listen to him. They go and they fill them to the brim, and understand, we're talking like 180 gallons here. Then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. And then it says they did so. So put yourself in their shoes for a moment. These are nameless, faceless people. We don't hear about these particular people before this account. We don't hear about them after. They're servants. They're subject to the authority of someone. Okay, they're probably in a lower order. Maybe they're the lowest order. I don't know. But they decide to obey Jesus. They do these crazy things. I mean, to take that violated the law, what they did. And of course, it would take time for them to do that. They didn't just pull up a fire truck and dump a hose and fill them all up, and it took a minute. And then, they filled them to the brim. Not with wine. That was the problem. They don't know what's going on. They just chose to step out, and they chose to do this. See, they must have been thinking, what happens when I take the cup and I filled it with water and I'm supposed to take it to my banquet master, which was probably their boss, and I'm going to go and I'm going to give it to him, and he's going to drink what? Water? Like I am messed. What a risk that they take in the middle of this critical moment. Talk about trust. What if we realized, one thing for us to say we trust God, we trust in Jesus. It's a good thing to say that, we trust in Jesus. But what if we realize that trust actually becomes an action word? And that in life's critical moments, Our trust in God is actually demonstrated by our obedience to God. See, sometimes it takes courage to demonstrate that trust. We're in this situation and we don't know what to do. We don't know which way to turn. It doesn't make sense, or maybe the next right step doesn't make sense. We think we've been prompted, but we're just not sure. But you see, trust in God is demonstrated by obedience to God. And here's what it means. We obediently take the next step because we trust God. What? We trust in a God who knows. And we trust in a God who cares. And we trust in a God who acts. See, I think that if God knows what he does, God will care, because that's who he is. And if God cares, he will act. Now, he might not act the exact way we think he should, but he will always act doing what's right for us on or for our behalf. I love what Craig Groeschel said. He said this just a few days ago. I read this. He says, you don't have to understand completely to obey immediately. I love that. You don't have to understand completely to obey immediately. It's kind of like at times where God just kind of dangles the trust carrot and he says, you trust me in this moment? Why don't you obey me by taking the next step and see what happens? You don't have to have it all together. You don't have to have all your ducks in a row. But if you trust me, step out and put it into action. Look what happens. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been churned into wine. He didn't realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and he said, everyone takes out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have too much to drink. But you've saved the best till now. That's amazing. That's awesome. And the groom's probably thinking, okay. He doesn't know what's going on. Here's the result. Water's turned into wine. It's the best wine yet. It's an overabundant amount. They estimated that you could get up to 900 standard-sized bottles of wine from what Jesus did there. And ultimately, a heartfelt need was met. And that's a game changer. So I want to ask you as we close this morning. I don't want to ask you, I want to say this. I want to say how you respond when the moment hits makes all the difference. You see, God knows your every moment, and if God knows your every moment, he certainly knows every one of your critical moments. How you respond when the moment takes place, I believe will make all the difference in the world. Acknowledging God, learning to do that in the midst of those critical moments, and then of course, putting our trust into action and taking that step of obedience to that right next step or next steps, believing that the right outcome will come in place. We might not totally understand it, but we're in God's hands, right? It's like the song we just sang this morning, right? I will rest in the Father's hands. And then what? I leave the rest in the Father's hands. In normal moments, in regular moments, and in critical moments, may that be so for you and for me. Would you bow your heads and let's pray? God, thank you that we truly can rest it into your hands, that we truly can trust in you for everything, Lord. Help each of us to be able to acknowledge you and to put our trust into action. And God, right now, I just want to pray a verse of scripture, God, a promise from you. I want to pray it over everybody here in our Waterloo campus, everybody tuning in our Kitchener campus, and everybody tuning in online. God, your word says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. Don't try to figure it on your own, but in everything, if we acknowledge you, God, you promise that you will make our path straight. May we be people who would follow you and trust in you in everything. And we just pray this in Jesus' awesome, powerful name. Amen.